Hi there, today we're talking all things Joy Division and those grey market releases. Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time. And if it is your first time, don't forget to hit like, subscribe and tap that notification bell. It really does help the channel grow. Straight out of the gate, there's something slightly unusual about one of these records. Not only are some of the tracks mislabelled, but some of them appear to be from entirely different concerts. And in one case, the grey market version may actually sound better than the official release. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a closer look at these records and see exactly what's going on. Today I want to talk about something that sits in a slightly unusual corner of the vinyl collecting world, and that's grey market live releases. Now, if you're a collector of post-punk vinyl, and especially if you're a fan of Joy Division, you've probably noticed that over the past few years there's been a steady stream of live albums appearing on vinyl that were never officially released by the band. Now I've picked up 3 of these recently, and they're all presented as double albums. We've got Exhibition, Amsterdam, Disordered, Douches, 1979, and Transmissions, Eindhoven, 1980. All 3 are based on recordings that have circulated among Joy Division fans for decades, but they've now been repackaged as nicely presented vinyl releases. Before diving into the records themselves, it's probably worth briefly explaining to those that don't know what we mean when we talk about grey market releases. Grey market releases aren't official releases from the band or their record label, but in many parts of Europe, radio broadcasts and certain recordings can be legally issued after a period of time under copyright law. That's created a small niche industry where labels press historic broadcast recordings onto vinyl. And that's why over the last few years we've suddenly seen a wave of live recordings from Joy Division and other bands appearing in record shops. For fans, they can be fascinating because they capture the band during the period when their live reputation was becoming absolutely formidable. Let's start with Le Bains Douche, 1979. That's a really good reference point. Next we have Exhibition, Amsterdam.
Turn the fallback on, please.
This one appears to draw heavily from the famous Paradiso concert in Amsterdam in January 1980. This is one of the most widely circulated Joy Division live recordings, and it captures the band right at the end of their touring career. By this point, the band were already performing much of the material that would later appear on the album Closer, even though the record hadn't yet been released, or recorded for that fact. So, the set list includes songs like Transmission, obviously, Isolation, Colony, and also Shadow Play from Unknown Pleasures, and of course, Love Will Tear Us Apart. What's striking about this performance is just how tight the band sound. Steve Morris and Peter Hook lock together rhythmically in a way that almost feels mechanical. But at the same time, there's an enormous amount of energy in the performance on this recording. You can hear the band pushing these songs into darker and more expansive territory compared with the studio recordings. And finally, we come to Transmissions, Eindhoven, 1980. This was recorded around about a week after the Paradiso gig. This recording comes from a Dutch radio broadcast, again capturing the band right during the same late period of their career. Like the other two releases, it's presented as a double LP, which means the music is spread across 4 sides of vinyl. Now that might seem a bit excessive because the original recordings could possibly fit onto a single album. But spreading the music across 2 discs actually allows the sides to be cut louder with better dynamics because there's more space available in the grooves. For music like Joy Division, where Peter Hook's bass and Steve Morris's drums play such a central role, that extra groove space can actually help the record sound a little more open. One particularly interesting thing about the Eindhoven recording is that it features a rare live outing of the song Ice Age. This is a track that didn't actually appear on record until the posthumous compilation Still, which was released roughly 18 months after the death of Ian Curtis. So, hearing the band perform Ice Age in a live setting like this offers a fascinating glimpse into the material that wasn't widely known at the time. There's also another detail that I noticed when listening to all 3 of these recordings, and that involves the song 24 Hours. On every one of these performances, Bernard Sumner plays the guitar slightly differently compared with the version that would later appear on the album Closer, and also indeed the live version that eventually appeared on the album Still, which was recorded at Joy Division's last concert at the Birmingham University before Ian passed away. The chord changes are slightly different, and the way the guitar parts move through that progression isn't quite the same as the final arrangement we know from the studio version and indeed the Birmingham University version. When I first noticed it on the Amsterdam recording, I actually thought Bernard had simply made a mistake during the performance. But after hearing the same variation across multiple recordings, it becomes pretty clear that this wasn't a mistake at all. It seems pretty much likely that the band was still developing the arrangement live, experimenting with how the song should be played before it was finally recorded for Closer. That's actually one of the fascinating things about listening to these live recordings. You sometimes get to hear songs in a transitional state before the final song arrangement becomes fixed. And it's little details like that which make these recordings particularly interesting for fans. Ultimately though, the real question is, with any of these releases, is how they actually sound. Now, in all honesty, this is probably the best I've personally heard the Paradiso recording. One thing that's missing here is the song Passover, which appeared, at least partially, on some of the earlier bootlegs of the recording. But the reality is that most of those older releases, the recording of Passover was incomplete anyway, with parts of the performance missing, I think the first half of the song. So leaving it off this release actually makes a certain amount of sense. Rather than including a fragment of the song, the label seems to have opted to present a cleaner and more coherent listening experience. And personally, I think that decision works quite well. One thing collectors quickly notice with these grey market releases is that the track listings aren't always accurate. Songs sometimes appear under slightly different titles, and occasionally a track from one concert gets mixed in with material from another show. You can often tell when that happens because the ambience suddenly changes, the crowd sounds different, the room suddenly feels larger or smaller. Sometimes the balance of the instruments change. So part of the fascination with these records is actually trying to work out where each track really comes from. So the obvious question is, are these releases worth buying? Well, if you're looking for definitive archival releases, probably not. They're not sourced from original master tapes, and they're not curated by the band themselves. But if you're a fan of Joy Division and you're enjoying hearing how the band sounded live, these recordings can still be incredibly compelling because they capture a group that was evolving extremely quickly. You can hear a transition from the raw intensity of the Unknown Pleasures era to the colder, more atmospheric sound that would define Closer. And when you listen to these performances, you realise just how powerful Joy Division were as a live band. There's an urgency and tension in these recordings that's very hard to capture in the studio. Personally, I quite like these grey market releases. They're not perfect. They're never going to replace the official albums, but they do offer a fascinating glimpse into the band's live history. And for collectors, they represent another interesting corner of the Joy Division catalogue to explore. But it does leave one slightly intriguing question. If there really are multiple sources for some of these concerts, audience recordings, soundboard recordings and radio broadcasts, it makes you wonder how much material might still exist in archives or somewhere that we've never properly heard. Because occasionally these grey market releases seem to surface versions of recordings that sound different, sometimes even better than the officially released ones. Case in question to the band's Douches. So I'd really be interested to know what you think. Have you heard any of these releases? And do you think some of these grey market issues might actually be using better sources than the official archive releases? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, bye bye.